Namaskar and welcome. My guest today on Garuda Talks is Neeraj Atri ji, who has written this wonderful book called The Brainwashed Republic that we'll be discussing. So welcome Neeraj ji, welcome to the show. Namaste.
Namaste ji, thanks for inviting me to the show. Thank you very much, and a warm welcome to all the viewers.
So without much ado, I'm just going to dive into it. Again, the book here is in front of me, The Brainwashed Republic. Maybe I'll put up a link. You can also go and buy this from the Garuda store. Neeraj, first give me a little bit of background. I think your background is in physics, and this book is about NCERT textbooks and history. So how did you get into doing a review of history textbooks?
As far as my academic background is concerned, I had nothing to do with history, and I used to be very bad in history during my school days. And I used to think that this is a worthless subject and no nation should waste any time on history. But then during informal discussions with my students, I had that uncanny feeling that either the students are having very wrong impressions regarding history, or maybe I am somewhere very seriously wrong regarding my concept of history and what has been happening in the past. So one fine day, I thought that why not reconcile this problem, or this nagging feeling that I'm having, and it was again triggered by a very informal discussion that I was having with my engineering students. So I won't go into the details much. It was regarding RN invasion theory. Now they were so confident that it is a historical fact that there was some kind of RN invasion. And I had an impression absolutely contrary to it. I thought that this is just a made up theory. So it was their conviction that forced me to settle the issue once and for all. So when I was going downstairs after taking my class, we had a bookstore just nearby. I bought the entire set of history books by NCERT and started reading them. Now I was reading them with a very open mind that if I am wrong, I'll be corrected, and if the narrative is wrong, then I'll try to do something about it if I can. So that is how then when I started reading these books, I had few doubts. So I started circling all those portions, and the only solution that I could think of was that what I'll do is I'll file right to information applications to the NCERT directly, that let me know what are the sources which you are using to put this narrative. And if I'm convinced by those sources, then I'll revise myself. And if not, then that means there is something wrong with history. So that is a brief of how I got into history while teaching physics.
Okay, and when was this? What year was this when you started this investigation?
2009, 2010, perhaps.
Okay. So this was even before this last government change happened.
Yeah. If I remember correctly, 2011 was the first RT application that I filed.
Okay, wonderful. And yeah, so when I was, I hadn't read the NCERT textbooks, even though I had a feeling about it. But you've done the hard work and you actually went and read it. But when I read the book, I was completely appalled. I mean, I've spent about half my life in the West and half my life in India, and when I read this description in NCERT textbook, I mean, it cannot be described anything short of propaganda. I mean, this whole textbook seems like propaganda, which is saying that, if I were to put it in a nutshell, Hinduism bad, Islam, Christianity good. That's the one-line summary of this entire NCERT textbook. This is about proving how bad Hinduism is and how great Christianity and Islam is. So this would be expected of missionary propagandists. It should be expected of religious bigots. But for NCERT to do this is completely shocking. So how did these books even come about? Have you a sense of the history of the history?
Yeah. See, Earlier, I used to be very naive regarding politics. I never had any
जी,
interest into it. When
जी,
I opened up a newspaper, that only used to be to skim through the business news and sports news. That was the only things which I used to read. But after going through the response that NCRT gave me, I vaguely recollected that when Vajpayee government had come in, there was this huge controversy regarding saffronization of education and Sanskritization of education. But those were very, very uh, dim recollection of these things. But it was somewhere in the back of my mind. So then I try to connect the dots that when that noise was being created in the entire mainstream media, then what happened after that? I wanted to track that down. Then I noticed that when the Vajpayee government was defeated and UP1 came to power, that was in the month of May or June 2004. They appointed Arjun Singh as HRD minister. Now, I've been doing little bit of activism since my college days. So, and one issue very close to my heart was the Bhopal gas tragedy that had taken place. And when I had studied that tragedy, I knew that Arjun Singh is a very bad guy. He was a very corrupt person. That was my impression of this person. And when I skimmed through newspapers of 2004 of those that period, then I found out that what they did was within 24 hours of UP coming to power, the education secretary was changed, and within 2 months, a committee was set up to revamp all the history books, and the narrative was created that the Vajpayee government has put in lot of toxicity into the books, and therefore the job of this committee is going to detox or detoxify these books. And when I went through the list of people who were attending those meetings, there was Teesta Setalwad, Yogendra Yadav, and all such people now whom we can very easily know that they are urban axles. So these people were present in those committees, and within 1 year, the entire textbooks were ready and they were in the satchels of the students. So that is how the alacrity with which they worked and how alive they were to the importance of creating this propaganda into the minds of our students.
yeah. So this is, this to me is the most shocking part in a way. I mean, we know, for instance, the left and the communist states, for instance, for them the narrative war has always been the most important war. Inculcating doctrine, using propaganda, this is classic techniques of communist regimes, for instance, and certainly the UPA. And of course, this is very much so of colonial powers and of missionaries. Missionaries work by inculcating propaganda. But I read something like, in NCERT class 8th book, there's a quote, Pandita Ramabai, a great scholar of Sanskrit, felt that Hinduism was oppressive towards women. So you use this kind of technique. Tell us about this, because especially after having lived in the West for so long, my understanding of the feminism movement in the West really arose as a revolt towards Christianity, towards Christian patriarchy, right?
Yeah.
And patriarchy really enters the world through Abrahamic religion, through male god religions, where the feminine energy in the world is suppressed. And so what you do is you turn it completely on the head, and you attack Hinduism directly. I mean, this is like they're not even hiding their propaganda. They attack Hinduism. At the same time, they extol Christianity and Islam as some great savior of women, which is exactly the missionary agenda. This is part of the evangelical agenda. So, what is this Rambai quote, and what is their background?
Okay. See, you used a very beautiful phrase, turned it upon its head.
Yes.
The simile that I used to think of in my mind was that in chemistry we used to study something known as displacement reactions.
Hmm. Hmm.
That when a reaction is taking place, one reactant is removed and another is replaced by it. That is what NCRT has done. They
Hmm.
have taken over all the positive aspects of Sanatan Dharma and pasted them onto the Abrahamic ones, and all the negative attributes of the Abrahamic cults have been superimposed on Hinduism or Sanatan Dharma. And this has been done very smartly. Now, this example of Pandita Ramabai is a classic case of that. Now, she was born to a very poor Brahmin uh, Shastri, and you'll notice the irony as we go by the story of this lady. This Brahmin, poor Brahmin, very hand to mouth kind of existence, he was determined to educate all his children, irrespective of their gender, into all the classical texts of Hinduism. So he was teaching them, and by the time Pandita Ramabai, she had a younger brother also, 1 year younger to her. By the time they were in their early teens, probably 14 or 15 years of age, the father died, the mom also died. But by this time, both these siblings had some knowledge of Sanskrit and Sanskrit texts. Now, since they were in a very impoverished condition, they somehow went to Kashi. And when the Pandits of Kashi saw this young girl so well versed in Sanskrit and scriptures, they gave her the title of Pandita.
Hmm.
Now, normally what happens is when you think of the Brahmins of Kashi, the image created is of very retrogressive society in which the Brahmins are so orthodox that they can be associated with misogyny and all those negative attributes which nowadays are very commonplace. And actually, what is happening? Those very Brahmins, they are giving this little girl the title of Pandita.
Hmm.
So then she starts learning a little bit more about scriptures along with her brother. And within 2, 3 years, the brother also died. So now this young girl, about 18 years of age, is alone, but she's very determined, very feisty lady. She goes to Maharashtra and starts preaching, starts giving lectures, series of lectures in Maharashtra, where she says that the present, now I'm talking of late 18th century, she goes into the heartland of Marathas, into Maharashtra, and says that today the situation, the pitiable situation of the women that is prevalent in our country is not due to Hinduism, because our scriptures say that women should be educated. It is due to the customs, it is due to the distortion of the customs that the women are in such a deprived state today. Therefore, it is collective duty of the entire Hindu society that Hindu women should be educated. And the entire Maratha or Maharashtra society, especially the Brahmin society, welcomes her with open arms, which is again contrary to the entire narrative that you hear. Then she gets married to a person who is a year older than her. Maybe she's 19 and he's 20 years of age. He's an advocate. So now she gets some stability in her life, but then again, within maybe 6 months or a year, the husband also dies.
Hmm.
And by that time, she's pregnant. So at the age of 21, she is young, widow.
The sound is going off, Neerji. There is some Wi-Fi or some problem. Um,
Let me see. I've
Again,
got
we
a
are talking about the Brainwashed Republic by Neeraj Atri. Really fascinating discussion on the distortions in NCERT textbooks. Yes, you were finishing up the story of Ramabai.
Yeah, yeah. So now she was a widow of 21 years of age with a very young daughter to take care of. Then she falls into the trap of missionaries.
Hmm.
They mollycoddle her. They take her to England, and there she's baptized along with her daughter, given very handsome amount of money to go back to India. Then she comes over here and starts proselytizing for Christianity.
Hmm.
So this is 180 degrees reverse of what she was doing earlier.
Hmm.
And now, why they are putting her in NCRT books is that here's a woman, she's a Pandita, she is an expert of Sanskrit. Therefore, the implied inference which can be drawn is that Hinduism itself is oppressive, it's all the scriptures are oppressive. That is the
So,
propaganda.
they don't talk about the fact that she got converted and she's an evangelical Christian.
No, that is not mentioned anywhere. And there
Yeah.
is very,
And in
there is
fact,
no,
even the example is probably supplied by evangelical. I mean, my suspicion is that this board that's constituted, it is all the evangelical groups are literally supplying the material for propaganda of what to put, and these
yeah,
textbooks are following that script.
absolutely. There
So,
is a very, very interesting point which I missed out. On
right.
this very page of Pandita Ramabai, if you look at the second paragraph, needless to say, all this more than alarmed the Orthodox. For instance, many Hindu nationalists felt that Hindu women were adopting Western ways.
Hmm.
Now, the story behind this is that again, notice the irony. It is UPA, which is Congress, which is putting this over here.
Hmm.
And at the time of Pandita Ramabai, one of the tallest leaders of Congress, Bal Gangadhar Tilak, had
Hmm.
pointed out the mischievous activities of this woman, whom they are
Right.
branding as Hindu nationalist.
Right. Right. Yeah, so that's really the irony of this is that they've taken one after the other, they take propaganda. And also, yeah, there are so many other examples that you were talking about where they really don't show, they kind of show that they use the diversity of Indian society, and they use this colonial point. I had an essay a long time ago called "Why India is a Nation" that became quite popular, and it was deliberate part of British colonial propaganda to teach Indians that India was never a nation. It is just a assembly of disparate groups and so on and so forth, belying, of course, the 5,000 year, such a cultural unity of the land, which is actually not found anywhere else in the world. But the NCERT textbooks actually take pains to show the opposite. They want to prove that India was never a nation,
Yeah,
which is the colonial line.
yeah. They are trying to show as if it was a fractured country, and everywhere there were fault lines, and these fault lines are being exploited to produce unrest in the country by a democratic institution like NCERT.
And of course, the tragedy is that UPA literally days and months after they come to power, even without a majority, being a minority coalition government, but they are still so focused on the agenda that they revise all these textbooks within a year. And here we've got a government with a super majority which has all the power in the world, and in 7 years they are proud not to change a single word of it.
Yeah, that is the most painful part actually.
Yeah.
What happened was when this government came to power, I was a little bit relieved that now I won't have to lobby with government or with the courts that the syllabus should be corrected. That now it is going to take care of itself. But unfortunately, I've been proven to be an idiot in that case.
Yes, but that is why your book is so important, and this is why it needs to be highlighted. More and more people, everybody needs to read this book, Brainwashed Republic by Neeraj Atri. And one of the important things is, we have to make it a mass movement. We have to get more and more people aware of it, more and more people demanding change, and no more excuses, because there's always excuses. So yeah, tell us a little bit about this aspect where India is shown to be not a continuity. Do you have some examples or quotes in your mind? Or
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Just let me take it out.
okay, sure.
Uh, what they have done is, yeah. Now this is an example. This is on page 10 of class 7th.
Okay,
What they've done is they've taken an excerpt from a poet called Amir Khusro's book.
okay.
Amir Khusro had written a book regarding India, and in that, okay, can I show it to you?
Yeah, yeah, sure. You can
Yeah.
share.
Okay.
We are
Here.
talking about Neeraj Atri's book, Brainwashed Republic, on the Garuda channel.
Is it visible?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
It should just be
Now,
coming.
yeah, this is from class 7th, page number 10.
Okay.
Look at the entire quote. In 1318, the poet Amir Khusro noted that there was Now mark the words, a different language in every region of this land. Then Sindhi, Lahori, Kashmiri, Dwar Samudri, Telangani, Gujjari, Malabari, Gauri, Awadhi, and Hindavi.
Hmm.
Now, this is the
This,
quote
this
from
thing is
Amir.
not visible for some reason. Let me see if it's not coming on the screen. Maybe there is some error. So yeah, just go ahead and read it for us because it's not on the screen. Yeah.
Fine, I'll read it for
Yeah.
you. Uh, Firstly, NCRT has their own sentence, which is in 1318, the poet Amir Khusro noted that there was.
Hmm.
Then they are putting the quote of Amir Khusro. A
Okay.
different language in every region of this land. Sindhi, Lahori, Kashmiri, Dwar Samudri, Telangani, Gujjari, Malabari, Gaudi, Awadhi, and Hindavi.
Hmm.
So this is purportedly a quote which has been taken from Amir Khusro.
Hmm.
Then here the quote is broken. Then NCRT put their own commentary. Amir Khusro went on to explain that in contrast to these languages, there was Sanskrit, which did not belong to any region. It was an old language, and then they have again put the quote from Amir Khusro. Common people do not know it, only the Brahmins do.
Hmm.
Right? Now, what has actually happened is Amir Khusro, when he's originally writing this, I'll now read out what he actually wrote.
Okay.
He's saying, as I was born in Hind, notice, they've deliberately removed this portion.
Hmm.
I may be allowed to say a word respecting its languages.
Hmm.
Second portion. Now, again, which is he's respecting the languages. Then, third point is there is at this time in every province. Contrast this with what they were saying. They were saying a different language in every region of this land, whereas he was saying every province, there is at this time in every province a language peculiar to itself.
Hmm.
So the term province has been replaced because when you're talking of province, obviously you're talking about a consolidated entity for which there are different provinces.
Right. Right.
And then further he says, peculiar to itself and not borrowed from any other. Then the quote is matching with NCRT Sindhi, Lahori, Kashmiri, language of Dugar, Telangani, Gujari. So this is okay.
Hmm.
So they removed the all those important parts which are showing that these are the languages of Hind, number one, and these languages are respected. And then the last sentence is even more important. He again says, these are all languages of Hind, which from ancient times have been applied in every way to the common purposes of life.
Hmm.
So, had they put in this one paragraph, that would have told the students that we belong to one of the oldest civilizations, having so much of diversity inbuilt into it, and all these languages have been respected since time immemorial.
Hmm.
Now, what is even
Yeah.
more interesting is what he says about Sanskrit.
Hmm.
He says, but there is another language more select than the others, which all the Brahmins use.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, by partially quoting, they've changed the entire implication of the quote.
Hmm. So yeah,
And
this
since,
is classic methods of propaganda, which is
yeah,
that there is an agenda, and the agenda is that they have to tell the all of the children of India, and the NCERT textbooks are used all across India, and then even the state boards rely on them. So they're teaching all of the children of India. Hinduism is oppressive, Sanskrit is oppressive, Brahmins are bad, and then the other side, Islam is great, it's egalitarian, Christianity is great, it's egalitarian. There's no trace of the misogyny of Christianity that all the feminists were revolting against in the West. This is where women didn't have any property rights in the 19th century. They couldn't. The suffrage movement was trying to have right to votes for women in the 20th century, right? If it was all egalitarian, what were all these things? In fact, women in India had property rights, whereas Christian women didn't have property rights. In fact, you have a quote on that, on Hindu women enjoying property rights, and the Western women, feminists are quoting that how come Hindu women have these rights and we don't have that rights. I found that was a
absolutely.
very interesting reference you had.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the other part is this whole notion of slavery. Now, uh, you have the section called omitting Abrahamic slavery, which again is such a complete distortion, because there were huge slave markets and slaves being transported from India into the Middle East. In fact, the whole this Hindu Kush range, where the Hindus, it's really the Hindus are dying, and then the slaves actually were being transported across. That is another reason for that, and that is completely wiped out. There's not no mention of Christianity slavery or Islamic slavery, but Hinduism is actually supposed to be oppressive.
Yeah, actually, it is the other way around. What they've done is, in class seventh, I don't
Hmm.
have the quote right now in front of me, but what they've done is that when all these sultans, Tughlaqs, and Khiljis were coming, they were enslaving people by the lakhs.
Yes.
How they have depicted is that they raised even lowly people to the level of some kind of officers.
Hmm. Hmm.
Whereas, in fact, what they were doing was, wherever they went, they used to kill all those males who were above the age of 12 or who had attained puberty, and
Yes.
all those who were prepubescent, their testicles were crushed. They were converted into eunuchs, and then they were forced to memorize Quran, and then they were sent for wars. Well,
Yes.
it was ultimate in inhumanity what you can do to a
Yes,
person.
yes, and this is, by the way, this is the whole legacy of Islamic conquest. In fact, I was in Turkey, in Istanbul, and this concept of harem, which is actually from the word haram, which means that no males are allowed there. It is haram for the males to
For,
go there, which is where
forbidden
this
to
word harem comes from. And then they would capture all these children. They would cut off their genitals of the boys, right? They would made them into eunuchs, and then they became the guards for the harems. That
yeah.
is what they were being used for, and this is being extolled as some kind of emancipation act.
Mm.
And then how these slaves were given important positions and so on and so forth.
Yeah, you're right.
And also, you mentioned that the how the diversity of parts of Europe, whether it's Greece or other places, is shown as a positive feature, whereas in India it is shown as something which is separatist in a way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That thread runs throughout these books everywhere.
Hmm.
Another example, which is very very in the face,
Hmm.
that is when they're talking of Alexander,
Hmm.
they are saying that he had a massive army of 6 lakh soldiers.
Hmm.
But when they come to the reference to Ashok, then they raise all sort of doubts and innuendos in by saying that was it ever possible to have a soldiery of 6,000 to 6 lakh people?
Hmm.
So when it is for West, it is always glorified. When it is for India, it is always demeaned, or at least put a question mark against.
And when it is in relating to Islamic kings, it's always whitewashed and spun as something
Yeah,
which is very positive.
yeah,
Even jizya is spun as positive in some ways.
hmm. Yeah.
Um,
If you read the wording regarding jizya, it's mentioned in the book somewhere. They're
yes.
saying that it was extended to Hindus as well.
And such a great favor is being
Yeah,
done
yeah.
that they are subjected to a religious tax,
Hmm.
and that all of that is used for propagating some other religion,
Hmm.
and not their own. But this is a great favor on to Hindus as well. Um, and then later on, this is the whole this whole idea of there's a lot of anti-Brahmanism also against Brahmins, and this is also a very interesting thread, because my research points more and more to the fact that Brahmins were demonized in colonial scholarship because missionaries saw them as rivals. So for missionaries, the Brahmins were the obstacles to conversion, and this is one of the reasons why they were called satanic and from the devil. And in fact, there's a whole in the when the Goa Inquisition is going on. One of the things that they're pointing out is that if we were able to destroy the Brahmins, then we would be able to convert them, because they come in the way of our conversion, because they are too wily and smart. And this is the legacy of anti-Brahmanism, which is being carried on in the NCERT textbooks as well.
Yeah. Um, Only two quotes will suffice to give the entire idea regarding this bias against Brahmins.
Hmm.
When Marco Polo came over here, he very specifically mentions, because
Hmm.
he was not a missionary. He tells that there is a class of Brahmins, and he was talking of the same area, Goa and its surrounding,
Hmm.
that they are
Hmm.
so upright that they won't become a Mohammedan even if you offer them the kingdom of a place.
Hmm.
And after some time, when Francis Xavier comes, now he comes
Hmm.
over here with his evangelical motives.
Hmm.
He is saying that these Brahmins are very cunning and they need to be eliminated.
Hmm. Hmm.
That these two foreigners themselves can give you an idea about the kind of challenge that Brahmins were posing to conversions.
Yes. Yeah, in fact, the if you read the ancient account, for instance, if you read Megasthenes or if you read any of the ancient account, even of the Chinese travelers, none of the accounts of the foreigner travelers ever show Brahmins to be anything except those held in very high repute. Um, all of the travelers talk about how much respect the Brahmins have. Why do they have respect? Because they were serving the people. Like even Dharampalji's early British accounts show about Brahmins going to the villages and putting smallpox vaccine, for instance, and all of these things. And in other places, how they're predicting things for agriculture, how they're well versed in astronomy, all of those things. So all of the foreign travelers, when they are coming as travelers without the agenda, then they are praising Brahmins. It's only when the missionary and the evangelical and the Islamic conquest where they want to convert, that is where the Brahmin is shown as the obstacle and a target.
Yeah,
That's where the targeting starts.
yeah. And
But but the textbooks are using that lens.
absolutely. Should I give another example of this?
Sure, sure, please. Yeah.
Okay. Now, in class 6th, when the
Hmm.
child is most vulnerable of 12, 13 years of age,
Hmm.
page number 46,
Hmm.
can I read the Hindi example?
Yeah, yeah, please, DJ.
Hmm. What they're saying is, अब कॉन्टेक्स्ट चल रहा है ऋग्वेद का यहाँ पे।
Hanji, Hanji.
पेज नंबर 46 है कि
Hmm.
ऋग्वेद में मवेशियों, बच्चों और घोड़ों की प्राप्ति के लिए अनेक प्रार्थनाएं हैं। फिर कुछ
Hmm.
लड़ाइयों की बात करते हैं और फिर बोलते हैं कुछ लड़ाइयाँ पानी के स्रोतों और लोगों को बंदी बनाने के लिए भी लड़ी जाती थी।
Hmm.
युद्ध में जीते हुए धन का कुछ भाग सरदार रख लेते थे तथा
Hmm.
कुछ हिस्सा पुरोहित को दे दिया जाता था।
Hmm.
शेष धन आम लोगों में बांट दिया जाता था।
Hmm.
अब ऐसा कभी भी हमारे देश में कहीं नहीं हुआ।
Hmm.
मैंने इनको आरटीआई लगाया, मैंने कहा बताइए किस आधार पे बोल रहे हैं, तो दे सेड
Hmm.
वी डोंट हैव एनी रिकॉर्ड्स अवेलेबल विद अस।
Hmm.
Now you notice this is exactly what used to happen in the Christian world and in the Islamic world.
Hmm.
इस्लामिक वर्ल्ड में इनफैक्ट जो इनकी होली बुक है कुरान, उसी में ये मेंशन किया जाता है कि जब आप लूट के लाओगे माल तो हमने आपस में बांट लेना है।
Hmm.
तो वहां पर जो लूटने वाले हैं और जो क्लर्जी है वो
Hmm.
आपस में धन बांटते हैं, और इसके लिए पूरे का
Hmm.
पूरा एक चैप्टर है सूरा अनफाल, जो 8वां चैप्टर है कुरान का,
Huh. Huh.
दैट इज डिवोटेड टू दिस।
Yes, yes. And
सेम
then,
यूज्ड
of
टू
course,
हैपन।
there's Malagani, there's also sex slavery, and women and children are considered mal also. They are also
एग्जैक्टली,
considered loot. Yeah.
एग्जैक्टली। और सेम यूज्ड टू हैपन इन क्रिश्चियनडम आल्सो, देयर द क्लर्जी एंड द रॉयल्टी दे वर हैंड एंड ग्लव। तो उनकी जितनी बुराइयां थी वो इन्होंने यहाँ पर ब्राह्मणों पे थोप दी है। दैट
Hmm.
इज वाई हम देख रहे हैं देयर इज एन एंटायर जनरेशन ऑफ पीपल हु इज एंटी ब्राह्मणिकल।
Hmm. Hmm.
और फिर आगे पेज नंबर 60 पे क्लास 6 में ही फिर वो क्या बता
Hmm.
रहे हैं। अब पहले इन्होंने बताया कि उन कुछ लड़ाइयां पानी के स्रोतों और लोगों को बंदी बनाने के लिए भी लड़ी जाती थी।
Hmm.
फिर आगे क्या बता रहे हैं कि जब खेती करते थे तो इसमें कमर तोड़ परिश्रम लगता था। ये काम ज्यादातर दास, दासी तथा भूमिहीन खेतिहर मजदूर करते थे। Again, a blatant lie, not based
Hmm.
on any फैक्ट, क्योंकि इस
Hmm.
पे भी मैंने आरटीआई डाली थी, दे सेड वी डोंट हैव एनी रिकॉर्ड्स अवेलेबल विद अस।
Hmm.
और जो आपने अभी बोला ना कि जब हम पुराने जो देखते हैं जो डॉक्यूमेंट्स हैं, अब जो सबसे पुराना डॉक्यूमेंट अवेलेबल है हमारे पास वो है मेगास्थनीज की इंडिका।
जी,
वो उसमें बड़े क्लियरली बता रहा है कि रिमार्केबल फैक्ट अबाउट इंडिया दैट ऑल द इंडियंस आर फ्री एंड नॉट वन ऑफ देम इज अ स्लेव।
right, right.
द हेलॉट्स, फिर वो हेलॉट्स की जब बात कर रहे हैं, एंड दीज हेलॉट्स डू सर्वाइव लेबर बट इंडियंस डू
Hmm.
नॉट इवन यूज एलियंस एज स्लेव्स एंड मच लेस अ कंट्रीमैन ऑफ देयर ओन।
Yes, yes.
तो
Yeah, in
डिस
fact, the fact is that slavery is an attribute of slavery on a massive level. Chattel slavery, especially, is an attribute of all societies but India. Rather than, and in fact, later on, there are instances of slavery in India that now they're documented, for instance, in the South, but that happens as an influence of Christianity and Islam. Um, and in fact, the Hindu king of Kerala, I believe, was the first one worldwide to specifically outlaw slavery. This happened before slavery was outlawed in the US, for instance. So this is and of course in Britain, all these colonial missionaries in the 17th century, all of them are, I mean, in the 18th century also, all of them are having slaves, and Britain, of course, is thriving on the slave trade as well. So all of that is pretty much whitewashed, and where slavery either didn't exist or it was brought from outside, that land is now being castigated for slavery.
Yeah.
And that's really very. And of course the other thing is just quoting this, taking these particular converts like Ramabai, who are evangelical, converts who've been converted to Christianity, and also quoting somebody like Periyar, who was completely an English stooge. He
Yeah.
didn't even want India to be free, and he becomes some kind of scholar. I noticed he's referred to as an ascetic and a Sanskrit scholar or something.
Yes, yes, yes. That is what they've done with him. Yes. See, what we should remember is that Periyar was a politician and a very shrewd politician at that.
Hmm.
And he is being depicted as if he was some kind of a sadhu who was disenchanted with the Sanskrit scriptures. That is why they're deliberately putting it over here
Hmm.
that E.V. Ramaswamy Naikar
Hmm.
came from middle class family. He was
Hmm.
an ascetic in his early life and had studied Sanskrit scriptures carefully.
Hmm.
And later he became a member of Congress.
Hmm.
He was one of the most reprehensible figures which I've come across in the 20th century. And
Yes.
he's being peddled as some kind of social reformer.
Hmm. Yeah, and again, I'm reading this contrast with the Christian missionaries, as some kind of high thing, and they're not talking about the literally the institution of the nuns is in many ways far worse than anything associated with the so-called demonized devdasis, because nuns have been used as keeps for priests, really, and as in servitude with no means to fend for themselves. There's all this, all over the West, and especially for me, it's appalling because I've spent half my life in the West and have seen that society from so close and looked at the kind of uproar there is in the West about the institution of the church and all the abuse by the Catholic priesthood and all the abuse of the nuns that is going on. And the whole thing is shown as some kind of emancipation of women, which is what the feminists had been fighting against. And Indian Hindu society, which is really, if I look at the West, today the maximum number of people in the yoga movement are women in the West. And they are finding, the power from Shakti and from Durga and the archetypes of the goddess and goddess worship is increasing because they don't have such things. In the Christian tradition, they have Mary, but she's devoid of all power. She's virginized. She's not, and she's not even the savior. She cannot save anybody. The savior is of course Jesus. The Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. There's an interesting person. I forget his name. He's actually a Westerner who's become a Hindu, and he says, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. What happened to the mother? She's become a ghost. you know. But because there's no room for the mother. But
Yeah.
I mean, my point is not that. My point is that one would expect balance at least. One would expect. I'm not saying that NCERT textbook should be full of criticism towards Christianity or Islam, but you would expect that there would be a semblance of balance rather than propaganda. And right now, it is simply propaganda rather than balance. So, any other points that come to your mind that should be specifically highlighted? I know you have this chapter with malicious intent, which I also thought was very interesting. That it's clear what the level of bias and the level of prejudice. I know there is a friend of mine who had done a survey of Pakistani textbooks, Yvette Rosser, and she had found that Pakistani textbooks, of course, are completely biased against Hindus. Where Hindus are a minority, and they're completely biased against Hindus and show Hindus as evil and wily Brahmin. Same thing is there in Pakistani textbooks where they're extolling Islam, and there it is happening because Hindus are targeted as a minority, and it's an Islamic state. In India, the same thing happens, exact same thing, where Hinduism is shown as bad and wily Brahmin. Same depictions, and Islam is extolled, and the excuse is because they're a minority, therefore they must be special care must be taken.
Yeah. And with that facade,
Yeah.
Hinduism and Hindus are being put down. Now,
Yes.
the unfortunate part is, as you just highlighted,
Hmm.
that when history books are written, there are two major concerns of the authors. One is that there should
Hmm.
be a glorifying narrative for the nation,
Hmm.
and second is that the truth should be told.
Hmm.
But the first objective is at a priority, so that even if sometimes someone has to lie a little bit, there should
Hmm.
be this feeling of grandeur and a positive feeling about your own country.
Hmm.
So such lies are peddled by Pakistan also. You must have noticed in American textbooks also that goes. Unfortunately, our country is the only country where it is reverse of that,
Hmm.
that the majority and the indigenous traditions are being run down, and the appreciation is bestowed on the exotic creeds. So in that way, we are
Yeah,
an exception.
on the invaders and the people who came and vanquished the invaders are praised, and the indigenous people are. It's like like the natives were exterminated by Christianity in all of the Americas. So it's we are stuck in like 19th century kind of depictions.
Hmm.
You were saying something.
Yeah, that is what I was saying. That uh, when we used to have these student exchange programs, and I used to notice the body language of students. A Japanese used to be very proud that he's a Japanese. American used to be very proud that he's an American. Our Indian students used to be very apologetic about being Indians.
Hmm.
And I used to feel that as if someone has removed the spinal cord out of the students of our
Hmm.
country.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then when I read these books, it struck me that this is the cause why Indians don't have self-respect and
Hmm.
lack that confidence in themselves.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Unless
And this
unless
has
our
a lot,
English,
lot of impact. It has economic impact, it has psychological impact, it has social impact. When I went to China, in the museums, I was very struck that their museums made it a point to, like, for instance, there was an exhibit about zinc plating, and then they said, okay, the West claims to have discovered this and this and this century, but this was known in China, 500 years earlier, right? So all of their museums and all of their things are clearly juxtaposing the Chinese achievements with that of the West, and they're showing how Chinese civilization is superior. Whereas the Indian textbooks, I don't even think they have a history of Indian science or history of Indian mathematics in there.
no. See, what they are doing is they are doing the reverse of that. Wherever they are
Hmm.
putting some tidbits of history regarding science, it is always being portrayed as if the entire science has been imported from the West.
Hmm. Hmm.
That is what they're doing.
So again, we are talking with Neeraj Atri. He's the author of The Brainwashed Republic. वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट बुक क्रिटिकिंग एनसीईआरटी टेक्स्ट बुक्स। ये बहुत जरूरी है कि ये एक जन आंदोलन बने नीरज जी। ये लोगों, क्योंकि सरकार ने 7 साल में नहीं किया तो वो अगले 3 साल में भी कुछ करेगी, उसका भी कोई भरोसा नहीं है। और जहां तक मैंने सुना है कि कोई एजेंडा नहीं है, कोई प्लान नहीं है, कोई इसके ऊपर काम नहीं कर रहा। लोग बहुत सोचते हैं अरे बड़ा सीक्रेट प्लान है, तो मेरे को 7 साल से यही बोल रहे हैं, क्योंकि मैं ये क्रिटिसिज्म 2016 से मैंने कर दिया था, 2 साल दिए थे। 2016 से मैंने कहा था कि ये क्यों नहीं चेंज हो रहा, अभी तक चेंज नहीं हुआ, 2 साल हो गए हैं। लेकिन लोग मेरे को कहते थे नहीं नहीं बस होने वाला है, अभी देखो बड़ा सीक्रेट प्लान है। तो मेरे को कुछ सीक्रेट प्लान अभी नजर नहीं आया है। तो हमको इसको हर मंच से उठाना बहुत जरूरी है कि आप अपने देश को आगे ले जा ही नहीं सकते अगर आप बच्चों को ये बता रहे हो कि, और वो देश जो कि सबसे बहुत दृष्टि से सबसे आगे रहा है, ये सो कॉल्ड ह्यूमन राइट्स में भी ये सबसे आगे रहा है, स्टेटस ऑफ वुमेन में भी ये सबसे आगे रहा है। ये जो बाकी सब देशों में चैटल स्लेवरी थी और इस देश के अंदर स्लेवरी को भी ठीक नहीं माना जाता था। इतनी तरह से आगे रहा है और उस देश की और संस्कृति को आप खराब बता रहे हो। और जो आक्रमणकारी थे और जिन्होंने लूटपाट की, जिन्होंने इतने लोगों को बंदियों बनाया, कत्ल किया, मारा, उनको आप कह रहे हो ये तो आपको बचाने के लिए आए थे, संस्कृति को का उद्धार के लिए आए थे। तो इसको हम कैसे आगे लेके जाएं? आपने इसके बारे में कुछ विचार किया और इसको हम कैसे बदलें?
इसमें हाँ देखिए, मेन तो वही है कि जितने लोग अवेयर होंगे और जितना हम प्रेशर बना सकते हैं सरकार के ऊपर, वो हमें बनाना चाहिए। क्योंकि जैसा आपने अभी बोला ना कि 7 साल हो गए तो 3 और निकल गए, और तो इट विल बी अ लूजिंग प्रोपोजिशन। क्योंकि हर साल जो बच्चे से पढ़ के निकल रहे हैं, दे आर एब्सोल्युटली डीरेसिनेटेड, दे आर अपरूटेड फ्रॉम देयर ओन ट्रेडिशंस। और इसीलिए जो आप ये देख रहे हैं कि यूनिवर्सिटीज़ में जो आपको अनरेस्ट देखने को मिल रहा है, कि अजीब अजीब से बच्चे देखने को मिल रहे हैं जो अपने देश से प्यार नहीं करते, उसका कारण ये किताबें हैं। और अगर जैसा हम मानते हैं कि आज की जो प्रेजेंट प्रधानमंत्री हैं, उनकी जो सरकार है, वो देश के लिए, संस्कृति के लिए वचनबद्ध हैं, कटिबद्ध हैं, तो उनका ये दायित्व बनता है कि इसको करें। हम केवल ये कर सकते हैं, उनके ऊपर प्रेशर बना सकते हैं। तो वो अलग अलग फोरा पे जाकर हम ये बात करें, और जैसा आपने कहा मास मूवमेंट बन जाए, तो फिर पॉलिटिशियन भी विवश हो जाते हैं इसे करने के लिए।
जी जी। कुछ किसी का प्रश्न आया है, ये हिंदी में आई है, हिंदी संस्करण आया है इसका?
रिक्वेस्ट किया था मैंने कि हिंदी का इसका ट्रांसलेशन शुरू हो जाए, लेकिन अभी बहुत स्लो पेस है।
अच्छा,
आई हैड टू चेक के वो कहीं ऐसा तो नहीं कि इट हैज गॉन इन द वो ठंडे बस्ते में तो नहीं चली गया। आई हैव टू फाइंड आउट। आई डू इट।
नहीं, इसके लिए जो भी हम योगदान दे सकते हैं इसको प्रचार के लिए और उसको लाने के लिए, तो गरुड़ की तरफ से अवश्य होगा। जहाँ पे भी प्रकाशन हो उसकी हमें कोई चिंता नहीं है, क्योंकि जो सही बात है वो लोगों तक पहुंच नहीं पाई है। सिर्फ इसीलिए हमने गरुड़ को शुरू भी किया था कि वह ऐसा प्लेटफॉर्म बने जिसपे आपके जैसे स्कॉलर्स और रिसर्चर्स आके अपनी बात कह पाए। और सब लोग अवश्य खरीदिए ये बुक, ब्रेन वॉश रिपब्लिक है नीरज अत्री जी की। गरुड़ का लिंक भी है नीचे, गरुड़ बुक्स पे जाइए, वहां पे आपको मिल जाएगी। और इसको हमें मुझे लगता है एक और भी मैंने नीरज जी से बात हो रही थी कि इसको हम क्वांटिफाई भी कर सकते हैं नीरज जी, इसकी कोई मेथोडोलॉजी बना के। और जो लोग कुछ वॉलंटियर करना चाहें, अगर आपका कोई संस्थान है या उसका कोई ईमेल है, आपसे कांटेक्ट कर पाए या ट्विटर पे कर पाए और जगह, तो वो भी आप साझा कीजिए ताकि लोग इससे जुड़े, क्योंकि और जुड़ेंगे लोग तो और काम हो पाएगा इसमें।
बहुत अच्छा आइडिया है जो आपने दिया है, क्वांटिफाई करने वाला। जी
जी जी जी। सो नमस्कार दोस्तों, आज के लिए इतना ही। पुस्तक है ब्रेन वॉश रिपब्लिक, आप अवश्य इसे लीजिए। और नीरज जी बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद, आप आए और आपका समय हम कुछ देर से बातचीत हो रही थी 2-3 सप्ताह से कि आपको आना है, लेकिन आप आए, तो बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। और इस पुस्तक के लिए भी बहुत बहुत आभार
जी। लास्ट टाइम जो कैंसिल करना पड़ा था, एक फैमिली प्रॉब्लम थी, कोई बहुत सीरियस थे हमारे परिवार में, तो उसके लिए मैं क्षमा भी चाहता हूँ। और आपको साधुवाद है जो आप इतना अच्छा काम कर रहे हैं गरुड़ प्रकाशन से, और मुझे बुलाने के लिए बहुत बहुत आभार जी। नमस्ते।
नमस्कार।